In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a topographic profile and also calculate the gradient between 2 points. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is take a look at the topographic map that you have. In this case, we have an island. We know it's an island because it says this is the ocean. If you see the ocean anywhere on a map, you know that's sea level. Sea level happens to be 0 feet or 0 meters. So in this case, our outermost line is going to be at sea level, that's 0, and because our scale bar is in miles, this is going to be 0 feet. Okay, so 0 feet is our initial starting elevation. The map is labeled here. The next contour line is labeled as 25 feet. Okay. Based off of that, we can figure out our contour interval. So for this particular map, our contour interval, which is the change in elevation between adjacent contour lines, is 25. So our contour interval is 25 feet. Before we start looking at our profile, kind of the best thing to do is just to label all of the elevations here. So this line is going to be 50 feet. The next contour line will be 75 feet. Okay? So if we're going to go for the profile, you can see that there's a cross-section already drawn between point X and point Y. So those are the 2 points we're going to use to create our profile. First thing you need is a piece of scrap paper. We already have all our elevations of these lines labeled. This is a pretty simple example. The next step, you want to line up your scrap paper. Notice I'm going from the middle of X here. I'm going to mark off the middle of Y. I'm going to mark that Y because that's our endpoint. The next step is to mark off all of the intersection points between your cross section, the line that goes across the map, and where they intersect with contour lines. So now I've done all that. The final thing you want to do before you actually build your profile is label each of these lines with their elevation. So this line here is 25 feet. The next line in is going to be 50 feet, 75 feet, 75 feet, 50, 25. We know Y is on that outermost line. That's 0 or sea level. Okay? So once you have this done, you're about halfway finished with making a profile. The next step to making a topographic profile is kind of sliding down, and you're going to use the provided grid or kind of graph space and the scrap paper you just had. Okay? So we started at X, we ended at Y. Notice that the grid is exactly the same length as it is on my scrap paper, and that's how it should be designed. Okay? X and Y are already plotted for you, so you're starting at 0 feet elevation, and you're going to end at 0 feet elevation. And notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines here. It makes sense to use the same interval as our contour interval, so that's 25 feet, 50 feet, 75, and 100 feet. Okay? So we can just put elevation over here. Typically this will be already done for you on a Regents exam or a test in class. Okay? So zeros are already marked down. We're going to slide our whole paper up, and now we're going to put down the location where there's an elevation of 25 feet, like so. Do the same thing for 50 feet. Again, you're going to do this for 75 feet. That happens to be our highest contour line, not necessarily the highest elevation, the highest contour line. Okay? So at this point, we're finished with the scrap paper for now. You're left here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points of intersection. And if we check the map, our line goes across here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it matches. To complete our topographic profile, you have to connect all of these points with a smooth curve. And to do that, you have to look at the map and think, if I go from X up until I hit this first point at 75, you're going uphill. From 75 till you hit 75 again, you're still going uphill, because this point B is within the 75-foot contour. That means it's higher. So you're going up, and then you start to go back down as you go towards Y. So the profile is going to look something like this. All right, so again, you don't have to use a straight edge here, you're just kind of freehanding. So at 75 feet, we talked about how point B could be higher than that. So this is a hilltop, and then you start going downhill. Okay. And you just want to complete that. So for this map, that's what the profile would look like. Okay. And if we check this, there's just one peak. There's one peak in our profile. It kind of makes sense. Okay. The next thing I want to show you how to do, in case you are having trouble with this, are gradient calculations. So I'm going to calculate the gradient between point C and point D. Now, to do this, the first step in any sort of calculation is just to write down the formula. In the case of topographic maps, gradient equals a change in elevation over a distance. Okay. If you look for this exact formula in the reference table, you're not going to find it. What the reference table says is change in field value. Elevation happens to be a field value. It means it's a value you can find on a map. Okay. So first thing, before we start kind of filling this out, I'm just going to write down point C and point D. Here I'm just going to record their elevations. Okay. So on the map, point C is on the 25-foot contour line. That means that C has to have an elevation of 25 feet. Can't have any other value. So point C is 25 feet. Point D is also on a contour line. Happens to be on the 50-foot contour line. Okay. Any points on a contour line have to be equal to the value of that contour line. So point D is 50 feet. The last piece of information we need for gradient is the distance. So to do that, we're going to go back to our scrap paper, and we're also going to use the scale bar here. So maps are going to have a scale bar on them. In this case, we're measuring between point C and point D. So you're just going to take your scrap paper and line them up, line it up. I like to use the edge because I'm lazy. Put the mark in the middle. I'm going to just label that point D. I know the corner is point C. So now I can move this to the scale bar. Always start at 0. And we can see it's the full length of the scale bar. I'll move this down so you can actually see how many miles it is. The distance between point C and point D is 5 miles. Okay. So I'm going to come back down here and just put in distance from C to D is 5 miles. It's really important that you include units throughout this calculation, because if you do all the work and then you don't have units at the very end, it's unfortunately wrong. Okay. So change in elevation, that's going to go from 50 feet at point D to 25 feet at point C. So 50 feet minus 25 feet divided by the distance of 5 miles. Okay. I'm showing all of my steps here just so you have a sense of what you're doing. 50 minus 25 is 25 feet divided by 5 miles. 25 divided by 5 is 5 feet per mile. Okay. So that is your gradient calculation. What this means is for every mile that you walk in between point C and point D, your elevation changes by 5 feet. So that's not very steep at all. It's a relatively gentle slope. Okay. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Good luck.